Wednesday, May 20th, 2020, afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Carla, good afternoon. Please call the roll.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Hardesty?
Aye. I hear.
Udaly?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Wheeler?
And I am also here. We are convening as the City of Portland Budget Committee. And before we get into this, could we please get the statement of order and decorum from legal counsel?
Yes, this is Matt Farley from the City Attorney's Office. To participate in City Council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the Council Clerk's Office for communications to briefly speak about the subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the final readings of ordinance.
Okay.
The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the City Council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. Interruptions, a warning given that interruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
Thank you. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by phone, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The public can also provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your continued patience, flexibility, and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. Colleagues, today, we will take a series of steps and vote as part of the approval of the fiscal year 2021 budget as prescribed by Oregon state law. As the City of Portland's Budget Committee, we will hold a hearing on the uses of state revenue sharing, consider changes to the approved budget as filed, and approve the tax levies for fiscal year 2021. Carla, can you please read time certain item number 390?
Yes. Approval of the fiscal year 2020-21 budget for the City of Portland.
All right, as I said, I'm convening this meeting of the City of Portland Budget Committee. We'll start with Jessica Kennard, Director of the Portland Budget Office. Director Kennard, hello.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. So the overview of today's hearing. So as the Mayor mentioned, Council is convened in your capacity of the Budget Committee. There are several steps that Council will take today. These steps are required by local budget law and include uses of state revenue sharing, consider changes to the approved budget as filed, and approve tax levies for 2021. So as a reminder of what steps have been taken thus far in the budget process, bureaus submitted their requested budgets at the end of January 2020. The City Budget Office then analyzed their budgets and their requests. City Council then held we held some work sessions on bureau budgets. However, the COVID-19 public health crisis resulted in the cancellation of several sessions. Materials from all bureaus have been provided to the public on the City Budget Office website. Of course, our financial picture changed dramatically, and we have had several ensuing conversations around that. The mayor released his proposed budget decisions on May 7th. The proposed budget document was delivered to council also on May 7th. The document was not printed this year and only provided online given the constraints of the public health crisis. Council then convened as the budget committee and conducted a hearing on the proposed budget on the morning of May 12th during which the mayor delivered his budget message, and in the evening, the Budget Committee was reconvened to hear public testimony on the proposed budget. These steps were necessary before entering the approved budget phase. Today, the council is going to consider changes to the proposed budget. These changes are going to take two different forms. The changes that are included in the approved budget as filed are detailed in the change memo attachment B. These were walked through with you all last week, and there are also going to be changes that can be considered by floor amendment. Individual amendments will be put on the table, seconded, and then voted upon. Again, the process for today is first the mayor is going to open a hearing for state revenue sharing. After reading from a script, hearing testimony, and closing the hearing, we will move to discussing the budget. We will first need agreement from the Budget Committee to consider the changes that are in that change memo, attachment B. That will need to be motioned and seconded. Next, we are going to open the floor for amendments. Each amendment needs to be motioned and seconded, and finally then voted upon. Last, we need an action to put all the change memo adjustments and new amendments on the table for public testimony. This will need to be motioned, seconded, and voted upon. This will feel like a vote to approve the budget, but this is just a vote to put all the amendments on the table. This allows the public to provide testimony on all amendments, both the amendments included in the change memo and then any new amendments. Further amendments can be made following public. There will then be a vote to approve the budget. Finally, we will vote to approve the tax levies. Following this hearing, the approved budget will be forwarded along to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, which has 20 days to review the budget. The TSCC will then conduct a hearing on the city's approved budget on Tuesday, June 9th at 9:30 in the morning. This hearing will be scheduled under the current virtual meeting format used for public meetings and will live stream on the city's YouTube channel. The final budget adoption is set for Wednesday, June 10th at 2 p.m. Public testimony can be received during today's approved budget hearing, the June 9th TSCC hearing, and the June 10th budget adoption hearing. We'll now go back to the script, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, for the state revenue sharing item.
Very good. I'm now opening a hearing to discuss possible uses of state revenue sharing. This hearing is being held by the City Council of Portland, Oregon, in compliance with the provisions of the State Revenue Sharing Regulations, ORS 221.770. It's to allow citizens to comment on the possible use of these funds in conjunction with the annual budget process. As proposed for council adoption, the fiscal year 2021 budget anticipates receipts totaling $25,024,268 from state revenue sharing. As has been the case in prior years, it's proposed that this revenue be allocated in equal parts to support fire prevention and police patrol services. Is there anyone here today that wishes to be heard on this subject? Carla, anybody signed up?
We had 8 people register for item 390.
Are there any, is there anybody on the line who would like to testify on the state revenue sharing component of the ordinance?
Mayor, will you ask them to raise their hands?
Yeah,
Right
okay.
now.
And Kaitlyn, so if you could, folks, if you go to the raise hand function, for some of you, it may be easier to take your cursor all the way to the bottom of the screen, click on participants, find yourself, and then raise your hand. That'll help Kaitlyn, our clerk this afternoon, understand whether you'd like to testify on a particular matter. So if there's anybody who'd like to testify on this narrow portion of the budget, which is focused on state revenue sharing, please raise your hand and Kaitlyn will call on you. And Kaitlyn, just quickly glancing here, I don't see anybody raising their hand. Do you?
No, I don't.
Okay, very good. Then I'm now closing this hearing to discuss possible uses of state revenue sharing. I will now entertain a motion to consider the changes to the proposed budget as presented in the memo titled Approval of the Budget for the City of Portland. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fritz seconds the motion. And now we'll hear from Director Kennard on the various approved budget changes as filed.
That's right, Mayor. So at this point, we'll discuss changes to the proposed budget. As a reminder, the approved budget before you totals $5.6 billion. The general fund discretionary budget is $568.3 million. There are 6,791.37 total FTE in all funding sources. This budget includes a $75 million reduction of general fund discretionary resources due to the projected financial impacts of the COVID-19 public health crisis on city resources. Notable changes between the proposed and approved budget as detailed in Attachment B and discussed at the work session on May 12th. A high-level overview of those changes include various technical adjustments, which, in addition to the changes to the general fund, there is an increase to general fund contingency by $112,292 due to a change in funding of the livability coordinator in the Office of Management and Finance from 100% discretionary funded to the general fund overhead model. There were technical adjustments in council offices budgets to equalize resources for support of citywide cost-saving measures. There is a reduction of about $2.1 million in general fund beginning fund balance as resources are remaining in the 2019-20 budget and not moving forward to 2021. And then finally, there's a technical adjustment within the Office of Management and Finance and Office of Community and Civic Life to properly align the citywide reductions with associated programs. There were a number of items that we walked through. The Attachment B is a long document that we walked through in detail at the hearing. I am happy to discuss any of the items that are in that memo if council has a desire to do so. Is there anybody who would like to talk through any of the items that we walked through last week in that memo?
Colleagues? I'm not seeing anybody jumping at that opportunity. Thank you, Director.
Okay, then I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, to lead the conversation around amendments.
Okay, and so just to be clear where we are, we're looking at the amendments on the sheet titled Approved Budget Amendments for Consideration.
Correct.
Okay, good. So I will start with my amendments and then we'll go into others. First of all, Director Kennard, did you want to read through these or did you want me to do it?
Either way, Mayor, I think it makes sense for you to lead. There are a number, there I think are 22 amendments.
Correct.
And they are grouped by commissioner. So each commissioner can choose to read their items. I think that might work best.
Okay, good. Then I'll jump in since I'm at the top of the memo and then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Fritz next. My first budget amendment for consideration is number 1. We'll call it Mayor Wheeler 1. It's a motion to allocate $231,000 in one-time general fund resource in special appropriations as approved for carryover in the spring supplemental budget. This would allocate. We have a motion and a second. Motion amendment number 2 is a motion to allocate $146,000 in one-time resources in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability General Fund that were approved as carryover in the spring supplemental budget.
Second.
We have a second. I think that was Commissioner Hardesty this time. Is that correct, Commissioner?
That's correct, yes.
Amendment 3 is a motion to allocate $83,000 in one-time resources in the Portland Parks and Recreation General Fund that were approved for carryover in the spring supplemental budget.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Hardesty. Number 4 is a motion to allocate $300,000 in one-time general fund resources in the City Attorney's Office in support of an approved carryover from the spring supplemental budget.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you. Number 5, motion to allocate resources for the council ratified labor contract with the Portland Police Commanding Officers Association.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Hardesty. Amendment 6, motion to amend Attachment D and add a budget note regarding the Portland Police Specialty Units as follows. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to read this into the record. Specialty units are common elements of public safety systems nationwide. In recent years, best practices approaches to this work have evolved, and communities around the country are considering how to best use specialty units. The Portland Police Bureau employs a wide variety of these units: the Gun Violence Reduction Team, the School Resource Officers Program, the Domestic Violence Unit, the Air Support Unit, the Behavioral Health Unit, the Canine Unit, the Cold Case Unit, the Criminal Intelligence Unit, the Human Trafficking Unit, the Narcotics and Organized Crime Unit, the Traffic Division, the Youth Services Division, and the Neighborhood Response Teams. Through its public safety work group, the City of Portland is asking fundamental questions about how best to structure a 21st century public safety approach that meets the needs of all Portlanders. The COVID-19 crisis has reaffirmed the need and the urgency of this important work. The use of specialty units must be part of this conversation. Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Hardesty will work together with city leadership and with other interested parties to consider the ongoing use of specialty units in Portland, and will bring recommendations to the council no later than February 1st, 2021. These recommendations will be considered as part of the budget development process for the fiscal year 2021-2022. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Number 7, motion to amend attachment, that was Commissioner Hardesty, sorry. Motion to amend attachment D to withdraw the budget note entitled Civic Life / Police Space Moves Plan.
Second.
Amendment 8, a motion to transfer $118,911 in ongoing resources from the Portland Parks and Recreation Tree Mitigation Trust Fund to the Parks General Fund operating budget for a botanic specialist. Number 2.
Second.
Colleagues, before I move on, there was one comment I wanted to make on number 7 that I inadvertently skipped over. We have a motion on 8 from Commissioner Hardesty. Back to 7, which is the civic life policy space. Never mind. Moving on. Number 9, a motion to allocate $72,000 in general fund resource to Prosper Portland for the Portland Film Office.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Fritz, the next amendments are yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the amendments you put in, particularly the film office. That's really good to hear. I move to allocate $123,985 in general fund resources to the Office of Equity and Human Rights for implementation of the resolution aligning COVID-19 response with the city's climate and equity goals.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I move to allocate $29,540 in general fund resources to the Office of Equity and Human Rights for critical administrative capacity and support in ongoing dollars.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Udaly, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to allocate $547,000 in recreational cannabis tax fund resources to the Office of Community and Civic Life as follows. Allocate $547,000 in ongoing cannabis tax fund resources to fund social equity community grants through the Office of Community and Civic Life. The source of this funding will be a reduction of $547,000 in cannabis tax fund resources budgeted for community grants in Prosper Portland. While the previously allocated $547,000 in Prosper Portland's budget was allocated on a one-time basis, sufficient ongoing cannabis funds have been forecasted to support this allocation on an ongoing basis. Amend attachments B, C, and E needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Thank you.
Second from Commissioner Hardesty.
I move to allocate one-time general fund resources to special appropriations for universal defense as follows. Allocate $250,000 in one-time general fund discretionary resources in special appropriations to support universal defense. The funding source for this action is a one-time reduction of $50,000 in general fund contingency and a reduction of $200,000 in one-time general fund discretionary resources in the Office of Community and Civic Life, which were previously allocated to Civic Life's budget for this purpose. Amend attachments B, C, and E as needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Thank you. I move to allocate $147,000 in ongoing general fund resources to fund the Regional Arts and Culture Council special appropriation. allocate $147,000 in ongoing general fund resources to ensure that the reduction taken by the Regional Arts and Culture Council is equal to the 5.6 reduction taken by other bureaus as part of the mayor's proposed budget. The funding source for this action is a reduction in ongoing general fund contingency. Update attachments B, C, and E as needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Commissioner Hardesty
Thank you.
seconds. Commissioner Hardesty, your amendments, please.
We're on to me. My first one, motion to allocate resources for the council ratified labor contract with the Portland Fire Association. Decrease ongoing interfund cash transfer from the general fund to the citywide obligations reserve fund and increase ongoing bureau expenses in Portland Fire and Rescue General Fund by $2,261,713 to fund the increased costs of the PFFA labor contract as ratified by the council on May 14th, 2020. The ratified contract also includes one-time savings to align with reductions included in the current budget. The funding source of this action is a reduction of general fund policy set aside by $2,261,713. Amend attachments B, C, and E as needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Commissioner Udaley seconds it.
Number two, motion to allocate $50,000 in ongoing general fund resources to support a council emergency security fund. With a rise of white nationalism, both nationally and locally, some Portland City Council members have faced increased threats to their health, lives, and safety for reasons pertaining only to their race, ethnicity, and/or gender. Because council office budgets are generally modest, and because the need for potential extra security is unpredictable, the need for a pool of resources for council members who face these threats should be established. This action will reduce on an ongoing basis by $50,000 in unrestricted general fund contingency and appropriate these resources in the Office of Management and Finance, a Chief Administrator's Office. This will represent an available emergency funding source to be drawn upon by OMF, who coordinates the provision of security services for council members when increased security is warranted due to credible threats of health, life, or safety. Amend attachments B, C, and E needed to reflect this change.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Udaley.
Number three, motion allocate $50,000 in ongoing general fund resources to support accessibility to city communications. Accessibility to city communications is vital for civic engagement, community empowerment, and safety. Accessibility should be a core tenet of all city communications, but not all bureaus have the same access to resources needed to ensure their communication can reach everyone. In order to accomplish this, this motion reduces unrestricted general fund contingency by $50,000 and increases the policy set-aside account by the same amount to support a citywide accessibility pool of funding for bureaus who do not have adequate resources to ensure the equitable distribution of communications. Bureaus would request this resource via a supplemental budget process request during the fall and spring supplemental budget process. Amend attachments B, C, and E needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Thank you.
Second from Commissioner Udaley.
Next, motion to allocate $633,000 and $633,244 in support of the Portland Street Response Pilot Program. Reduce general fund one-time contingency policy set-aside account by $500,000 and increase general fund one-time discretionary by the same amount within the Portland Fire and Rescue operating budget to support the Portland Street Response Pilot Project. Additionally, allocate $133,244 and one-time general fund discretionary resources as approved for carryover from the Bureau of Emergency Communication and the spring supplemental budget to Portland Fire and Rescue operating budget to support the Portland Street Response Pilot Project. Amend attachments B, C, and E needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Next, motion to reduce one-time general fund resources approved in fiscal year 2019-2020 spring supplemental budget in the Office of Management and Finance Procurement Services for a procurement disparity study. Reduce the $200,000 of one-time general fund discretionary resources in OMF procurement services for their disparity study carryover from fiscal year 2019-20 spring bump, offset with an increase to general fund contingency for PPB to potentially request the funding remaining in their lease space at Gateway Campus for at least another year to fund this change. And Mayor, I would just take out everything after, my apologies. I would just say that it would just go to general fund contingency, period.
Second.
Because of your move with the Gateway amendment, I will just remove the rest of that line. Make sense?
No, for clarification then, so.
Okay, so it's the offset will be an increase to general fund contingency, period.
Period, and then the remainder.
And then amend attachments B, C, and E needed to reflect this change.
Okay, and Commissioner Udaley seconds that with those changes. Commissioner Udaley. Okay,
Second.
Good.
Motion to amend attachment D to add the following budget notes. Identify a medically sound alternative to sobering services. In the spring of 2020, Central City Concern closed their sobering station, recognizing it was operating under an outdated model. However, a need for a similar updated service still exists. This budget note directs the Public Safety Work Group to lead a process to determine a medically sound alternative for services and to bring forward a plan at the fiscal 2021 fall bump. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion to reduce general fund ongoing discretionary resources in the Portland Police Bureau that are currently allocated for sobering services and realigning the resources to support a new sobering program to be requested in the fall supplemental process. Reduce 1.912.036 of ongoing general fund discretionary resources in the Portland Police Bureau's external material services budget per the contracted amount to support the chair's van and sobering services formerly provided by Central City Concern. Increase ongoing general fund contingency and a policy set-aside account for the funding of a future program to be determined by the Public Safety Work Group. Amend attachments B, C, and E needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Udaley seconds.
And this is the last one, colleagues. Motion to amend attachment D, specifically the budget note titled Public Safety Governance and Integrated Budgets. This motion will replace the current budget note, which identifies a fall timeline for implementation with an October 1st, 2020 start date as follows. Council directs the Chief Administrative Officer and the Public Safety Work Group to identify changes that will improve public safety, increase equity, and address systemic challenges at a citywide level. Specifically, the CAO shall work with the Public Safety Work Group Executive Committee to develop the following by October 1st, 2020. 1, models for housing shared administrative services for the public safety bureaus in the Office of CAO. These models should clearly identify which services should be centralized and included in an analysis of the impacts each proposed change would have on bureau operations. Number 2, a strategy for integrating Public Safety Bureau's budgets for fiscal year 21-22 and time for the fall budget monitoring process, and for fiscal year 21-22 budget development. The budget proposal should be aligned with a public safety strategic plan, and contribute to any required savings requested as part of the fiscal year 2021-22 budget guide. Council also requests guidance regarding long-term governance and accountability structure for public safety as a citywide system. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second, sorry.
That's okay.
It was a real long one.
I know. And that concludes my amendments.
Very
Mayor.
good. Any other amendments for consideration? Jessica, it's my understanding now at the council's discretion, we can go through and discuss any of these individually that we would like. And it's my understanding that at the end of that discussion, we then would call the roll. We actually need to move and second each of these individually again, and then vote on them prior to public testimony. Do I have that right so I don't go to jail?
So, yeah, so actually first, we actually do need a motion and a second to also put on, as we're discussing changes, all the changes that are in the change memo. That's what we need first. We need to have all of the changes together on the table, and then we're going to go into discussion for the amendments, and you are going to vote on each of those amendments. And what you're doing there is we're refining all of the changes, and then there's going to be a motion, a second, and a vote on all of the changes together.
Okay, so let me make sure I got this right. So a motion and a second on the change memo, which we can take care of relatively quickly. Then a discussion on all of the amendments are now on the table, and we can choose to either discuss or not discuss those. And I prefer we actually only discuss the ones where there's questions or disagreement or discussion. We would then vote on those individually. They're already moved and seconded. And then at the completion of that, we would move the entire package of those that had been motioned, second, and voted on. We would then move and second the entire package and vote on the entire package. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that all precedes public testimony, and that precedes the final approval of the budget.
Okay, and so for those who are waiting for public testimony, this will feel unnatural because this is not typically how the city council orders things, but we are doing this to be compliant with state statute, and we are not in fact currently convened as the Portland City Council. We are convened as the Budget Committee. So we are following state statute in terms of the order of things. So if you're confused by this, number one, that's why. And number two, welcome to the club. Commissioner Udaley has her hand up, and Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I am confused as to why we wouldn't be listening to public testimony before voting on these amendments, because that would mean that we are going to take our votes up or down, and the public testimony actually doesn't matter. So can you explain that to me?
Yes. So what you're doing right now, Commissioner, is you're voting to approve amendments that will make changes to the approved budget. You are not you're not issuing your final approval. After you hear public testimony, there is then an opportunity for further discussion and further changes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I missed that part. Thank you.
This is why they have a parliamentarian down in Salem.
Right.
Commissioner Fritz has her hand up.
So that Commissioner Udaley's question was mine as well, and it partially opens it. So I don't quite, the amendment would not, if the amendment doesn't pass to get on the table, how do people testify on it? And then how do we, in response to testimony, change our vote? Do we vote through all the amendments again?
That is a good question, Commissioner.
Why don't we turn that over to Matt, since he has his hand raised, so maybe he's going to give us some further insight. Matt? Matt, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
Okay, the process, as I understand it, is you have done everything perfectly so far. All the call for amendments, they've all been moved and seconded. That's perfect. Next would be, as I understand it, the public testimony. In other words, the mayor would call for public testimony on any floor amendments, changes to the memo, and the budget as a whole. If there's any public testimony on those things, we would have that. Next, there would be a series of votes. The first vote would be on individual amendments. So after the public testimony, the individual amendments are voted on as amendments to the original memo. Next, there would be a vote to approve the changes to the proposed budget as presented in the memo as amended. So the mayor would call for the vote to approve the adjustments in attachments B, C, and D of the memo as amended by the individual floor amendments. This is the vote on the package of all amendments to the budget. And finally, there would be a vote to approve the budget as amended. The mayor calls to entertain a motion, second, and vote to approve the budget as amended. It seems duplicative, but that is the process.
Okay, so let me make sure I memorized all of this. Commissioner Hardesty just fell out of her chair listening to this. Okay, so
I'm sorry.
First of all, no, I'm glad we clarified this. So first of all, we are going to take public testimony. After that, we are going to vote on the individual amendments that have been moved and seconded by the council. Then we will vote to approve changes to the budget, including any adjustments to attachments B, C, and D. Is that correct? Or E? B, C, and E, or B, C, and D?
I believe it's B, C, and D as in dog.
And D, okay. And you'll correct us later if it turns out that's not the case. And then we will approve the budget as amended.
You're voting on the package of all amendments.
Correct. So approve the budget package as amended.
And then, just to keep things interesting, you will then vote to approve the whole budget as amended. You, Mr. Mayor, will call to entertain a motion, second, and vote to approve the budget as amended. It's somewhat duplicative, but it's a 3-step process.
Okay. Yeah. Sonia just had the best comment. She just said, keep voting until somebody tells us to stop. All right.
I didn't even have the heart to tell you about voting to approve tax levies, but we'll get there.
Nor will you. We'll turn that page later. We're still on this page. Okay, good. So we will start, Carla, with public testimony. And Matt, you just still have your hand up there. Carla, how many people are signed up for public testimony?
Yes, Mayor, we had 8 people signed up, but I see we have 9 people waiting.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and also before we start, somebody waiting or to testify with the phone number ending in 0621. Would you identify yourself? That's a caller on the line 0621. If we could have your name.
And you have to press *6 to unmute.
Well,
looks like they dropped off. So
yeah, call in them later, Carla, and if they're still interested in testifying, of course they can. So why don't you call the first individual? 3 minutes, please. Name for the record.
The first person is Kaitlyn Dey.
Good afternoon, Kaitlyn.
Hello. Hi, City Commissioners. My name is Kaitlyn. I am here speaking as an organizer on behalf of Care Not Cops. I know you've heard a lot about us. I also organize with Western Regional Advocacy Project and the Stop the Sweeps campaign, although I'm not officially representing them in this meeting. Anyways, so basically I'm here to implore council members to reject any and all increases to the Portland Police Bureau's budget, ideally resulting in a reduction of the budget. Over $245 million are proposed to go towards the Portland Police Bureau. And this is not even including some of the money not factored into this budget, such as the contract between the Portland Police Bureau and Clean and Safe. Just think of where we could divert this money instead. Housing and tenant protections, free transit, and well-funded schools. Especially during a pandemic when many schools are going remote. Access to technology and internet for students will be a huge priority. Luckily, we, alongside dozens of community organizations, know of at least 3 units within the Portland Police Bureau which could be eliminated: the Gun Violence Reduction Team, School Resource Officers, and Transit Police. The GVRT, as we all know, is formerly the Gang Enforcement Team. A name change and slight restructuring of the department is not enough to make many communities, especially Black and Brown communities, feel safe from surveillance and harassment. The findings from the audit 2 years ago have not sufficiently been addressed. Eliminating this program can open up funding that will support programs which actually help us care for one another. In regards to the SROs, it is clear many students do not feel safe around them, as evidenced by the No SRO campaign last year. Furthermore, as a graduate from PSU, I can speak to my time working on the Disarm PSU campaign and saw firsthand the detrimental effect of having cops in educational settings, including the murder of Jason Washington. And my own experiences with my high school SRO, albeit I was in another state when I was a teenager, I very much remember how he had tackled students half his size and had even told students how he had killed someone when he was working for California Highway Patrol. He was not a great role model for students, and I foresee this happening in other schools with SROs. And I just wonder, are these the kind of adults we want around our youth in our community? And what kind of message are we sending? And finally, transit police are used to target poor people, especially houseless people who cannot afford fare. Imagine if we spent that money to make TriMet free and listened to Opal, who for years has advocated for the reinstatement of the ambassador program. All of these demands have remained consistent and will stay this way until we have these demands met. It is becoming increasingly clear police do not belong in our communities, yet we keep throwing money towards them. And so if we don't see these reductions this year, we're going to continue to fight in the fall, and this will continue to go forward. But we want to see more opportunities where we can see these demands from the public continuously being met, because we've seen various people say very similar things. And it's just becoming increasingly concerning when we're seeing so many programs to help reduce policing, but we don't actually see those reductions coming from the budget. And it makes us wonder, are we actually trying to find community care alternatives, or are we just putting out rhetoric and not actually doing the things we need to do to take care of our community and just putting more money towards the police because that's what the business associations are saying, and that is what the police union is saying. And that's all I have to say. So thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Kaitlyn, for your perspective. Next individual, please, Carla.
The next individual is Hyung Nam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I'm Hyung Nam. I'm one of the coordinating committee members of the Portland Metro People's Coalition of over 20 community organizations. We were part of the community struggle last year over the city budget, especially to save the vital parks programs from cuts, which are not just about recreation, but vital things like childcare for families. That work led me to carefully study the city's budget and volunteer to serve on the Budget Advisory Committee for the Portland Police Bureau. I've testified recently twice and also sent you all messages yesterday laying things out in more detail about my experience, especially as a BAC member. Today, I want to highlight a few points and support the letter that PMPC has signed on to with many other community organizations, including Unite Oregon, Jobs with Justice, Portland Resistance, Portland DSA, and many others. I urge you to represent the interests of so many that these organizations represent. In this time of crisis, we need to rethink our budget priorities. Portland spends over 50% of its general funds on public safety, of which majority goes to police. We need to think about what Portland really needs and think about what public safety means. The PPB's consistently shown that they don't serve the public. Their own study found that over 71% of Portland residents have little trust of the police, and that's even higher among people of color. PPB has also requested additional funds for overtime to police protests in this election year. From what we have seen, this is the opposite of public safety. It actually is inimical to public safety with the use of military weapons and so on. And also, I've noticed in their requested budget that they've recently called for additional 7 FTE for the SWAT team. I think this is completely wasteful, and we would be better off redirecting these funds to vital needs for the public that are under threat in this crisis. Because so much of the general funds go to policing, a proportional cut to policing is not enough. Other vital services are far more needed already, functioning on meager budgets. We need to rethink our priorities and create a budget that serves all Portlanders. Therefore, we should make cuts to other programs that have been ineffective and opposed by Portlanders, like the GVRT, the SROs, and transit police. This crisis gives us a chance to carefully review our priorities and values. We need to redirect public funds from over-policing to essential services like parks and childcare, hygiene for houseless, housing, representation and defense of immigrants, and to create our own public utilities such as municipal bank, internet, power, etc., that would all invest in the future and generate revenue and profit for the city to expand public services. Making these changes would help the city and be much more in line with the mission and values of our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it. Carla, next individual.
Is Andrew Riley.
Hi, can you hear me? Perfect. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, members of the Portland City Council. For the record, my name is Andrew Riley. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm appearing today on behalf of Unite Oregon, where I'm a community organizer. And I'm here today to urge you to prioritize everyday Portlanders in your fiscal year 2021 budget by cutting the Portland Police Bureau's budget. Unite Oregon is a statewide grassroots community organization. We organize immigrants, refugees, people of color, and working class folks of all backgrounds. In short, the communities we work with and in are the most acutely over-policed, the most systematically profiled, the most exposed to the violence of the criminal punishment system. And to be clear, that's not because our communities are somehow committing more criminal offenses than others, but rather because of where the Police Bureau has historically targeted its enforcement. I want to focus on a couple of special programs that we find egregious, that we urge you to cut, and that because of our experience with them. And I want to echo everything that we heard from Care Not Cops and Portland Metro People's Coalition. First is transit police. I suspect you're going to hear this a lot today. The transit police are part and parcel of the criminalization of poor and unhoused folks on our transit system. It's admittedly a complicated program, right? TriMet funds large parts of it, but it's housed at the Portland Police Bureau. It uses PPB equipment and personnel. It regularly responds to police calls in the city of Portland, and to the lay observer, it appears to be an arm of the Portland Police Bureau. But as far as we can tell, the city has no affirmative obligation to carry out TriMet's enforcement priorities, and we urge you to cut all city funding for transit police. Additionally, we have active work in Portland Public and David Douglas schools. We engage parents as active participants in the educational system. And one of the top concerns we hear is the school to prison pipeline, particularly for the parents of color that we organize. We've heard loudly and clearly that one of the first steps towards dismantling that system, that pipeline, is eliminating the practice of putting police officers in schools. And while the name school resource officer sounds fairly innocuous, these are police officers with full police powers, and it's perhaps no surprise that according to the city's own budget office, 57% of arrests in and around schools in 2018 were of Black youth, who comprised 10% of the school's population. We need to stop the criminalization of youth and invest in real safety. The budget in front of you, as I think you all know, is not just a bunch of line items on a page. As many have observed, including on this council, it's a moral document that reflects your priorities and commitments to our community. And that's why we're proud to sign on to the letter that Hyung mentioned with a growing list of organizations, including Portland's Resistance, Safe Routes to School, Portland Jobs of Justice, 350 PDX, DA for the People, Pacific Northwest Family Circle, and many others to call for all of the above cuts and more. As the coronavirus pandemic continues, we have to make some difficult choices about how to keep people healthy, safe, and whole, and we do not believe that we should be overinvesting our scarce resources in policing and punishment, but rather authentic community safety, health, and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it. Carla, next.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, Commissioner Hardesty.
Andrew, a question. Andrew, thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate Unite Oregon, Care Not Cops, and the Portland People's Coalition's perspective. I don't know if you were here when the mayor was reading some amendments into the record. But you may have missed that there will be a process that Mayor Willer and I will be a part of that will come back in front of the City Council in February. That's really going to take a deep look at all the specialty programs within the Portland Police Bureau, and quite frankly, to start the community conversation about what does community safety look like. I hope that Unite Oregon, Care Not Cops, and the Portland People's Coalition will be partners with us in that effort, because what we want is a police bureau that works for the community, and what we want is the community invested in telling us how they want to be policed. So the opportunity is coming up very quickly, and I hope that you'll be proactive and work with us to come back with the best proposal possible in February of next year. Thank you.
And one reasons why I support that process is, and no disrespect meant to anybody, but there is a lot of misinformation out there about what is actually in the budget and what is not in the budget. And so I think more communication is probably better than less. But thank you for being here to share your perspective. Next individual, please, Carla.
Next is Emory Mort.
Hello and welcome. Are they muted, Carla? I can't find the name.
Yeah, they are muted.
Pardon me.
There you are. We hear you.
Hello, Council. Good afternoon. My name is Emory Mort, he, him. And yeah, as to the comments Commissioner and Mayor just made, we are trying to follow the amendments as they unfold. And yeah, I definitely heard what you've said and appreciate that offer to work together going forward. So I'll now invite us to drift back to a few stories from the year related to public safety and policing. Council, recall the Jeremy Christian trial. You likely recall a detail, as I do, from the night before the tragic day on the train. On this night, Christian was on a train harassing and attacking a Black woman. She testified about the events, which included him throwing a full heavy bottle directly into her eye. The police were called and an officer arrived. The Black victim told the court the officer treated her as if she was the perpetrator, while Christian simply walked away, uncited. A small typical moment, Council, one small part in a chain of tragic events. Now remember another story, the December police shooting of Coben Henriksen in East Portland. One can read the 900 pages of grand jury transcript to hear from people like a mother sitting in line at Starbucks. She's there with her 3-year-old in a car seat behind her. She describes the same thing as everyone, a man walking slowly, he's unwell, he's out of it. She sees the officers arrive, pull their truck up close, one gets out, pulls out a large rifle, and unleashes 3 explosive shots within seconds. A woman near her gets out of the car, starts running around in distress, shouting, "They didn't need to do that. What could we have done?" In the transcript, the DA verbally redirects the witness away from the scene. A seemingly younger officer in the transcript describes showing up, fulfilling his duty to go to the body shot by the senior officer who has a certification. He says, unfortunately, the department uses these rifle shells that are designed to expand when they hit human bodies. And unfortunately, this is so they do a lot of damage. And he describes a body with 2 of these bullets in the chest and 1 in the mouth. A final story, Council, we have Black Portland auto auction employee Michael Fesser. It's been in the Oregonian for months now. I know some of you find it disturbing, as well you should. Despite deserved attention on West Lynn Police Department, much of the action, including the cover-up by the chief, was done by a highly trained former Portland GBRT and CERT officers known for their own decades of scandal. A lieutenant in West Lynn, former Portland gang officer, organized a half-dozen gang cops to apprehend Fesser, take his stuff, as retaliation for his totally obvious complaint of workplace racism. Lieutenant later retaliated again when Fesser refused to drop a lawsuit. He ordered his old colleagues to officially designate Fesser a dangerous person. Lieutenant did this whole scandal, then he quit West Lynn PD soon after, and he was hired the next day, counsel, by Oregon's Police Training Academy, where he's now on suspension from training every new officer in the state. So these senior officers, counsel running these special police programs in Oregon's largest police force don't need more money so that they can train each other to finally get it right one of these days. As you all know, there's kind of two options. One is to make fringe changes, or what we hope, and maybe perhaps what's coming, is to follow the letter sent to you by a bunch of our community groups, hold the police accountable in a real way. You've got to execute governing power over their budget and their special elite units. I don't see other ways to really address these issues. And if not you, who else are Portlanders and Oregonians supposed to go to get real action on these problems outlined here and in many other forums? And of course, I echo the previous commentary, and I thank you all for the work you're doing in these difficult times. And I certainly look forward to working together to solve these problems as we go forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Emory, for your perspective. And I also want to answer your question. The question was, if not us, who do you go to? You know you can come to us, and you do. And while I don't always agree with you, I do appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate the fact that you participate in these discussions. But you can also go to our state legislature, where for 2 years we have had a police accountability bill languish because the legislature doesn't seem to be able to ever have a quorum at the time that our public safety accountability bill is ready to be supported. It has now come out of the Senate unanimously, and I think this year it had a good showing where it started in the House. I can't remember honestly if it was unanimous, but it was significant, if not unanimous. But again, that bill did not pass because once again, there was not a quorum for the legislature to continue. So I would also encourage that there is an opportunity for us to join forces in areas where we do agree, and that is most certainly one of them. Thank you for your testimony. Carla, next.
Next is Eric Nordstrom.
Good afternoon, Eric.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for all that you do for your city, for our city. And I'm here to testify in support of greater funding for RAC and the arts. My name is Eric Nordstrom. My pronouns are he, him. I've been working in the arts for nearly 20 years as a filmmaker, performing artist, arts educator, and arts nonprofit employee. Now, more than ever, strong funding for the arts is the right choice for the prosperity of our city and its citizens. Art connects us to our humanity, creates community, and provides an outlet to express our fears, needs, and perhaps most importantly right now, our hopes for a better tomorrow. It's these qualities that are important at any time, but especially now. I urge your full and continued support of organizations like RAC that help to fund the immediate year-to-year fiscal needs of artists in Portland. I also urge you to look into the future and to create a long-term plan for the development of arts venues to support the needs of artists as our city grows. Although the funding may not currently be available for the development of arts venues, I encourage you to make the plan now, because how are we going to get to the spot to support arts venues in the future without having that plan in place now? Currently, looking at smaller arts venues in Portland, around 100 seats, these venues are struggling to hold on during this hard economic time. Medium-sized venues of around 200 to 350 seats are practically non-existent and mostly non-accessible for many artists in Portland. I understand that budget cuts are being made across the board. However, when making those cuts, I urge you to please keep in mind the value of the arts, especially at moments of turmoil like this, and also to please put a plan in place for the development of arts venues, so in better economic times, we can have a brighter future to look forward to. There's never an easy time to fund the arts. However, the right time is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate it.
I was gonna say you're on mute, Mayor.
I beat you to it, Commissioner. But just barely. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Next, Carla.
Is Scout Zabel.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Scout. I live in North Portland. I'm a preschool teacher and I organize with Care Not Cops. We do not yet know what the extent of the ramifications of COVID-19 will be on our communities. We do know that those who have been and will continue to be the most affected by the pandemic are communities who are already socially and economically marginalized. It is notable that these same communities are the most threatened by law enforcement's punitive measures to violently enforce new COVID-19 era directives. We know that strategies to mitigate the economic fallout of COVID-19 involve massive budget cuts to many different departments. However, a 5.6% cut across this entire city budget does not address the varying utility of these programs during this time. Rather, the depth of this crisis requires us to reimagine the way that we allocate city funding altogether. We want to emphasize that those departments which offer life-affirming resources are more crucial than ever, and funding to them must be prioritized. We have and have always had the funding to support these programs. It has been funneled year after year into the ever-increasing Portland Police Bureau budget. This budget, which has grown by $47 million in only the last 4 years, needs to be the well from which these necessary resources are pulled. If you are frustrated with the misinformation surrounding the city budget, look to the significant lack of opportunity for public input this year. Only one public hearing for us to comment on the mayor's proposed budget, and then now, today, the day of the vote. The dissolution of the gun violence reduction team, as well as that of school resource officers, transit police, would offer $14 million alone that could be allocated towards accessible housing, rent relief, public transit, education, or COVID-19 stimulus. With schools and city programs closed, we have even greater concern that the GVRT will escalate its well-documented efforts to target Black and Brown youth. These students who are now learning from home for the rest of the year need teachers, advisors, and social workers, not school resource officers. Public transit must be made free and accessible to essential workers and those seeking essential services, not exist as another site of surveillance and harassment. I was under the impression that amendments would be offered today that would have addressed the elimination of these programs now, not a further conversation in February. People need these resources now. The failure to do so is a betrayal. The difficult decisions made today will have reverberating impacts well into our future. We have an opportunity to fund people, not policing. Your loyalties are showing. Thank you.
Next individual, please, Carla.
Is Joanna Brenner.
Joanna?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. You're good to go.
Great. My name is Johanna Brenner. I'm on the coordinating committee of the Portland Metro's People Coalition, and I'm speaking in support of the letter which we, along with other community organizations, have written. We argue that in this time of crisis, the city needs to rethink how we understand public safety. I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty for taking the lead on further scrutinizing the special police programs that our group has highlighted as problems. And I look forward to all of us participating in the process that she and the mayor have initiated. Today, I want to talk about a different area of our letter, and that is the question of the police overuse of overtime as a budget issue. I want to point out that the city's auditor's report in 2018 identified problems, and as far as I can tell, as we can tell, although the budget is extremely opaque and it was very difficult to compare this year's budget to last year's budget because of changes in how the budget was configured, there has not been any real movement on this question. The auditor identified between $13 and $15 million spent on overtime. The North Precinct, for example, had overtime usage on over 40% of its afternoon shifts. Although the Bureau claims that overtime is the result of being short-staffed, the auditor's report identified management failure to adequately manage staffing as a cause of the excessive use of overtime, which is also extremely costly in terms of paying people, as you know. Portland does not cap overtime, allowing patrol officers to work more than 20 hours a week. They did so over 1,000 times in 2018. Other cities have limits. Denver, Colorado, and San Francisco, California cap overtime at 24 and 20 hours respectively. In addition to mismanaging staffing and allowing officers to work excessive overtime, the Bureau allows officers to work as private security guards for local corporate businesses, such as the downtown Apple Store and event venues. There is no evidence that this program is an appropriate activity for public employees, nor that these corporations are incapable of supplying their own security. Secondary employment is the third highest cause of overtime. Overtime work is not only a monetary problem. It is a problem in terms of what happens to police who work excessive overtime. They're more prone to accidents and injuries. They have a higher incidence of burnout. They use sick time more often and so forth. Overtime and fatigue also negatively affect the relationship between police and the community. When officers work long hours, they are also more likely to engage in abusive interactions with residents, and they are also more likely to be estranged from the community that they serve. Reduced social interactions and isolation from community and support systems breeds an us versus them attitude in the police, which, as we know, is one of the major reasons that we have such a difficult time exercising police accountability in the city. Although the city asked to do the Bureau to do a better job, as I said, the Bureau has not shown any success in this area. It has come back to the council without demonstrating any reduction in their budget request. Finally, I want to note that the Bureau has requested additional funding to police public protests. This should be denied. There is no justification for over-policing of the people's exercise of their democratic rights. I should point out that in addition to being counterposed to democracy, the militarization of policing at protests has been costly to the city, leading to successful lawsuits from individuals who have been injured exercising their right to protest. I want to thank you very much for listening to us during this very difficult and challenging time. And I hope that our voices will continue to be heard and that at some point we can see some movement on these issues. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your perspective, Johanna.
The last person who signed up is Samuel Hobbs.
Could you say the name again, Carla, please?
That's Samuel Hobbs.
Samuel, are you on board with this?
Yeah, can you hear me all?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. My name is Samuel Hobbs. Pronouns are he, him, they, them. I'm sharing my voice today in support of Portland's arts ecosystem and the Regional Arts and Culture Council. I share my voice because in times of struggle, we ultimately turn to art to anchor us. I also share my voice because we often think of art as an addendum to business and a sideline item. We need to start reframing this understanding so that we can more effectively support business in the future. When we think about the viability and value of art as a priority in Portland, we must consider the realities that this is not just about quote unquote art or making art. It is about business, technology, health, science, education, and our economy. Artists ultimately create entire ecosystems of jobs, not only for artists, but for technical writers, photographers, videographers, graphic web designers, administrators, financial consultants, tax preparers, food vendors, advertisers, wedding planners, bars, baristas, real estate agents, tax preparers, and many more. Artists have provided necessary resources for the advancement of prosthetics and biomechanics research. We have consulted, directed, and acted in movies and advertisements. We have done motion capture suits and have become creatures in blockbuster movies. Artists have reshaped entire health industries and how doctors and physical and occupational therapists understand pain, injury, and recovery. And we have helped veterans cope with the ravages of war, and we have provided an outlet for our children to express their beauty and fascination with the world. We teach discipline and focus. We teach the importance of failure. And more importantly, we teach the power of persistence and resilience. These are the realities of the value and valuability of arts. Every item I have mentioned demonstrates the demand for arts and the prudence in including art in business and the city's decisions. Arts are ultimately the lifeblood of our economy, and we drive the housing market. We create a world where people want to live. Since the beginning of the social distancing protocols, we have seen the importance of art within our nation. Within the first weeks of social distancing protocols here in Oregon, Catherine Dey-3, a Portland dancer, created an online international resource called Dancing Alone Together that connects everyday students and people with global dance luminaries and teachers. All of our dance studios, or many of them, have transitioned to all virtual classes, and we have witnessed many of our friends and family join movement and dance classes for the very first time in their lives. Just to give you an idea of the viability of these programs, Kate Wallach, a Seattle-based dance artist, ended up creating a virtual offering of her classes during quarantine, where a single dance class held twice a week hosts over 4,500 people in one class, asking for a suggested donation of $15. Her program is called Dance Church, and so I will leave you to do that math. In regards to RAC, I have received 2 grants from the Regional Arts and Culture Council since my time in Portland, which is 2012, I suppose. And I have applied for my 3rd this spring. My company receives support from RAC's Cultural Leadership Program. With RAC's assistance and guidance, I have learned to write grants. I have learned to connect with grantors and foundations, write budgets, and plan for my company's future. With the 2 grants that I have received from the Regional Arts and Culture Council, I have produced my first evening-length work in 2018. And last year, I launched a resource for Portland called the Union PDX Festival of Contemporary Dance and the Portland Dance Community Awards. Last year, with RAC funding, I commissioned 2 female choreographers, hired production and technical staff, rented space at the Portland Opera, celebrated 4 Portland arts heroes for their service to the community, provided professional level master classes, and hosted artist talks and student outreach performance. Administrators and arts organizations from all over the Northwest attended, including Whitebird, the Portland Art Museum, Pike, a Velocity Dance Center up in Seattle, and the University of Oregon, just to name a few. All of this would not have been possible without the support from the Regional Arts and Culture Council and other arts organizations, artists that rely upon the funding from the city of Portland. Portland would not be considered the international arts hub that it is without the support of the city of Portland. Right now, Portland, like many institutions, are facing decisions concerning how to move forward in a post-social distancing world. You are asking hard questions regarding arts funding and business, or questioning the viability of arts programming and funding for the future, and ultimately weighing them based on their perceived marketability. I'm hoping that I've increased or expanded your idea of what the perceived marketability of arts are in Portland. Ultimately, we really need to start thinking about how we can position Portland for the future, like Eric Norson was talking about, and start building a plan. And for me, and for many artists who rely upon the services of Portland, the funding from Portland, and the services and funding that we receive from RAC, that future requires appropriate funding for the Regional Arts and Culture Council. I think that's all I have to say at this moment.
All right, thank you, Samuel. We appreciate your coming and testifying today. And Commissioner Daly has her hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I have Madison Cario from RAC here, who was supposed to be on the testimony list. Can they speak?
I think anytime Madison comes and listens to us all, given how busy she is, she deserves to be heard. Good afternoon,
Thank you.
Madison. How are you today?
I'm great. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Let's see, for the record, my name is Madison Cario, pronouns they, them. You know, I'm the Executive Director of the Regional Arts and Culture Council, and I am here on behalf of RAC and for the artists, creatives, and arts and culture organizations that call Portland their home. The idea that artists and creatives will just be there when this is over is unrealistic. I don't know when this will be over, but I do know that without thoughtful, equitable, and generous support, they won't. They can't. What kind of city will ours be, and how will we heal without arts and culture? You know the economic impact. $364 million in annual expenditures from nonprofits, $9.9 million in attendance, and an additional $323 million that audiences spend when they attend arts events. That's when we're in business. But we're not in business right now, and we need funding to make it to the other side. I know there's a lot of pressure on this current budget, and I appreciate the work that you are doing. And we all have a role to play, a piece of this burden to carry. RAC is doing their part. January, we took a deep dive into our operations and made changes that were both necessary and incredibly difficult. We let go of good people and cut expenses so we could be better stewards of public dollars and focus more deeply on service while advancing advocacy and fundraising. When fully funded, RAC actually gets 85% of all the funds directly into the hands of the community. with the AEAF collection for fiscal year 21 anticipated to come in with a 75 to 100% reduction, every penny in special appropriations matters. Since the onset of the stay-at-home order, RAC went into action immediately, launching a statewide survey to identify the needs and setting up a fund for those most vulnerable, the individuals. To date, we have funded 348 people, $192,000, with over 34% of the awards going to people who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We gathered art funders from across the state, private and public, and created a pooled fund which launched a few weeks ago. That's now up to 1.5 million. Cuts to special appropriations now will result in the closure of organizations and the loss of creatives in Portland. Your support of RAC will enable us to help sustain hundreds of organizations and individuals until they can pivot and hopefully someday soon get back to what they do best: inspiring, delighting, inviting, and challenging you in every neighborhood, every day. Artists are truly Portland's secret weapon. That's what this money gets you. And I want to close with a quote from the late and great and blessed Toni Morrison. "There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. This is how civilizations hear." Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Madison. We appreciate the great work you do. And Commissioner Daly, do you have another comment, or is that just a residual hand raise? Very good. All right, so next we are going to vote on the individual amendments that have already been moved and seconded. I would propose this, colleagues. First, I'll get to Commissioner Fritz. Commissioner Fritz, did you have a comment? Commissioner Fritz?
Mute if you do.
Sorry. So you're proposing that we discuss each?
No.
Previously it was said we'd have a discussion and then do the amendments, but we're going to discuss each one as we go through.
Here's what I would propose, just but because a lot of these are consensus amendments and a number of them are technical. So what I was going to suggest is we go through each block of the amendments, and then if individual commissioners either have questions about specific amendments or comments about specific amendments, that might be the most expedient way to do this, unless people would prefer to do it some other way.
Okay, that's fine. We can just, as we get to each one, we can discuss it if we want to.
Okay, in the block of amendments I put forward, most of those are technical amendments and no particular surprise. There are a few that I would like to comment on, and I'd like to start on amendment number 6, unless somebody has questions about 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 first. And I don't see anybody jumping at that opportunity. We can always come back if somebody does. You'll recall that Amendment 6 is the one that amends Attachment D and adds a budget note regarding the Portland Police Specialty Units, and we had a little bit of back and forth during the public testimony period. I just want to put on the record that we've obviously been talking about the Portland Police Bureau specialty units for many years, predating my time on the city council and probably predating everybody's time on the city council. But this council hasn't really had time yet for a thoughtful conversation leading to decisions about how we want to use the specialty units. This budget note proposes that Commissioner Hardesty and I work together to consider the use of specialty units in the city of Portland and then return to the council early next year. This will give us both the time to have a thoughtful conversation and the opportunity to make any changes in next year's budget. And so I think you heard thoughtful commentary on that. I don't know if anybody had any more questions on 6. Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share a couple of comments on that well. As you know, I had originally put in some amendments that would have disbanded some of these specialty units, including the transit police, including the school resource officers, and including the gun violence reduction team. But because of the brilliant work of your office and the police bureau's willingness, as well as the ongoing work of the public work group, it makes perfect sense to me that we are going to be very thoughtful about this and do it in a way that really is intentional rather than doing it in a very rushed budget process. My preference, of course, before I even got on the city council, was that all those units never existed. But being as they do, I am very grateful that you worked with my office to come up with this compromise. And I think it's the right thing to do. And I just wanted to put that on the record that I appreciated working with your office to come to this agreement.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I appreciate that very much. And just a reminder on amendment number 7, because I know some people were confused about that because the entire amendment is scratched out. And I just want to be clear, that is effectively a motion to withdraw amendment 7, following council conversation about the benefits of co-locating the domestic violence specialty unit with the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence. I moved to withdraw the note. And in doing that, I wanted to be clear on 2 particular points. First of all, a lot of good and thoughtful work went into the original proposal, and I want that work to continue. And second of all, I commit that this specialty unit won't move out of the building in the short term or without a conversation with my colleagues. And I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty for acknowledging the challenge of keeping the specialty unit in this building, which is a lease that costs almost $300,000 a year. And I appreciate the partnership in finding resources to offset that lease and potentially leverage opportunities for the Gateway Center to revisit the terms of that lease. So I just wanted to put that comment in the record.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, before you leave that topic, the reality is that the Gateway Domestic Violence Center provides some incredible services for our community, and they are cramped right now. And so I believe that there may be opportunities if we take the time to relocate both Portland Police that works with the Gateway Domestic Violence Center as well as the Gateway Domestic Violence Center. They have not said this, but if you've ever spent any time there, it is definitely an elbow operation. And they do the best they can with limited space. But I hope that we take this opportunity to really be creative. The mistake you made was putting me on the committee, asking me if I would serve. And I'm trying to serve you and the community well because you asked me to do that. So I appreciate you pulling that recommendation because it is vital that those relationships are strengthened and not torn apart based on economic needs.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. No regrets. Amendment 8, the parks position related to tree planting. I just wanted to be clear, this was an amendment to authorize an additional position in the Portland Parks and Recreation Urban Forestry Division. This is a position that would be funded from the Urban Forestry's Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. And I wanted to be clear, it will not have a general fund impact. The incumbent in that position is going to help manage the design and the implementation of the Bureau's tree planting program with an emphasis on growing the tree canopy in East Portland, something we actually heard about on an unrelated item earlier this morning. And as PPNR shared during their Sustainable Future Work session last November, tree planting is a very important part of our shared climate, public health, and equity goals. This position is a down payment on putting that work in motion. And I think we heard from Bob Salinger on a completely unrelated issue this morning on that very subject. With regard to item number 9, the film office, I wanted to just add a couple of clarifying points on that. I was very pleased to introduce that amendment to provide general fund resources, which will support 50% of the Portland Film Office's budget. The remaining 50% of the budget would be supported through an increased fee on film permits. We heard loudly and clearly from the film industry that this office is vital to their success here in Portland. And I also want to clarify that the industry is willing to play a significant part of this office's success. And so I just want to say that I'm grateful to my colleagues, to staff, and the dedicated professionals in the film industry who worked hard with us to find this compromise solution that allows the film office to be funded in the next fiscal year. This pandemic, of course, is presenting us with unprecedented challenges, but I'm glad it's also leading us to find very creative solutions with our private sector partners. So I want to thank everybody who worked with us on that. That completes, unless anybody has any questions about other of my amendments, we'll move on to Commissioner Hardisty's amendment, or excuse me, Commissioner Fritz's amendments. Commissioner Hardisty, you have your hand raised, but I think that's still from last time.
That was just as leftover hand raised. I'll put it down.
No worries. Does anybody have any follow-up questions about Commissioner Fritz's amendments, or does Commissioner Fritz have any further discussion on her amendments?
I think everybody made some comments this morning on the resiliency resolution, and I appreciate that each one of you acknowledges that the Office of Equity can't do what it needs to do unless it's properly resourced. This budget, in fact, doesn't fully fund the Office of Equity and the work that it has to do, but it does start to correct some of the structural problems. And I'm hoping that with each of your shared commitment to the Office of Equity, that next year you'll look at increasing resources for it.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Any further comments or questions? Anybody on the amendments put forth and seconded in Commissioner Fritz's grouping? With that, we'll move to Commissioner Udaley's amendments. There were 3. Does anybody have any follow-up, or Commissioner Udaley, any further thoughts on your amendments?
Yeah, Mayor, I would just like to read into the record what I just shared with the public. I was surprised and disappointed to hear that I may not have the support needed to partially restore the budget cut to RAC. So here is what I just said to our community. I'm proud to be your arts commissioner. I have been involved in Portland's arts community since I was a teenager, and I spent 22 years supporting Portland's literary and visual arts community through my bookshop. Today, Council is considering a package of amendments to the Mayor's proposed budget. We seem to be in agreement and have community support for most of the amendments. However, the one that's up in the air is my amendment to partially restore the 9% cut to Regional Arts and Culture Council. I'm surprised that the small allocation, $147,000 from the general fund contingency, which was supported by the Mayor and the Budget Office, is in question. Our arts community, from individual artists to nonprofit organizations to our independent venues, are under threat. Artists who may be self-employed or independent contractors are still waiting for unemployment relief in month 3. Performers, performing arts presenters, and venues that depend on large gatherings have no financially viable way to ply their trade or run their businesses, and may not for another year. The potential impact to Portland's art and culture landscape and community is devastating. Portland has built its brand, I hate that word, on the backs of our arts community. A multi-million-dollar industry that provides thousands of jobs, is a major tourism attraction, and drives businesses to hotels, restaurants, and retailers across the city. But we haven't done enough to preserve or foster this community that is so essential, not just to our local economy, but to our hearts and spirit. I made a modest ask, reduce the cut to RAC to align with cuts to our city bureaus. What I really want is full funding restored to RAC in light of the disparate impact of the arts community and our historic underfunding of the arts. I'd also like to see the city commit to seeding an arts venue relief fund of at least $1 million, an investment on par with cities such as Seattle, San Francisco, and Austin. This partial restoration of RAC's budget cut would be a small but meaningful step towards supporting our vital arts community. I want to thank everyone who has emailed, called, and provided testimony in support of RAC. I've received more emails about this budget item in the last 24 hours than almost any other issue that's come up during a budget session. And finally, I think we need some clarity on what this $147,000 will be used for by RAC. And I want to invite Madison to answer that.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Udaly. And Madison, before you respond, I owe you an apology. I used incorrect pronouns in speaking to you earlier, and I want to apologize. I know that you go by they and them, and I apologize for that mistake.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. This money will go directly to our capacity building program, which is it's a multi-year, it's an intentional investment over time in communities that have historically not had access to our mainstream funding, which is for general operating support. So that's exactly what we would do. We would continue this program for another 3 years.
Very good. Thank you. And Commissioner Udaly, unless you have more, I see Commissioner Fritz had her hand raised as well on this item.
I just wanted to ask Madison to give some examples of the organizations that are being supported.
Can I ask a point of order? Excuse me, Mayor. Can I ask
Commissioner Hardesty, point of order.
Is it appropriate for people to bring people in to advocate for a financial position? I mean, I'm feeling very uncomfortable that I am sitting here listening to, I mean, anybody that wants money from our budget should be able to come and advocate for it. But this does not feel appropriate when we're deliberating on how we're going to spend the money. I think everybody's made the case for why they want money, but I'm just feeling like this is just like not appropriate. So I just want to ask the question. Maybe.
Well, I'm the arts commissioner and Madison is the director of RAC. And I wasn't aware that this item wasn't going to be supported until it was too late in the day to mobilize support, since we're requiring people to sign up on the Tuesday before council. I believe it is well within my rights to invite someone to testify.
And Commissioner Hardesty, your point is well taken. I made a specific exception in this case just because I could see that Madison was on the line and she'd been here. And so as a matter of course, you are correct. But I made this exception for Commissioner Udaly since Madison was on the line. Very well taken. There should be consistency. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. I appreciate that 250 people sent us emails over the past 3 days. I've answered, I think, most of them. Many of them didn't understand that RAC is taking the same cut that all the other that everybody is taking. And in fact, the bureaus, although the extra amount from the bureaus is 5.6%, the overall cut, counting some of the other measures that the mayor directed, is more like 9%. And it's also significant that some of the special appropriations received a 50% cut. I'm glad to hear that the film office is now funded because that was completely cut as well. And we know that people are hurting. It's hard to read those 250 emails and hear how challenging things are. On the other hand, we know that restaurants are really hurting. Restaurant workers are hurting. Childcare workers are hurting. There's all kinds of great work going on in our community that we wish we had the money to fund. And the only way we're going to have more to spread around to other needs is that everybody takes a trim at this point, including the city bureaus and programs. And RAC will still receive $3.95 million in general fund with additional funding from the arts tax. And if the level of payment from the arts tax is going to be an issue, then we should address that issue as far as how it's collected so that so that becomes more equitable. I know that Commissioner Daly has begun work on that. The council has demonstrated commitment to arts and culture and will continue to do so. And I just think it's unfortunate that one segment of our community knew enough to, or was encouraged to send in a bunch of emails and to come and testify when others perhaps didn't know that there was that opportunity.
Are you serious? That is how this literally works every year. And I want to point out the film office was not going away. It's the position, the liaison position that wasn't funded. And there's no work to do right now. So we're putting half of the money that I'm requesting for RAC into paying for a position for which there's no work to do right now. Also, the budget, the cut of 9% was applied to the special appropriation budget. And my argument is that RAC has a special relationship to the city and therefore should be treated more like a bureau than any other special appropriation group. And I might add that they've already made massive cuts to their staff. So they actually don't have more to cut. This is a small amount of money. I'm just baffled by what I'm hearing.
All right, are we done with our conversation on that particular item? Any further comments on anything in Commissioner Daly's list here? If not, we'll move to Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Hardesty, was there more you wanted to say on any of your amendments, or colleagues? Did you have any thoughts or questions on any of Commissioner Hardesty's amendments? I have only one.
I have nothing to add, Mayor, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I appreciate that. Commissioner Fritz had a question.
I have a friendly amendment to offer on the motion to allocate $50,000 in ongoing general fund resources to support accessibility to city communications. And this is based on feedback from the experts in the Office of Equity and Human Rights. They point out that this is required by law. And so the language in the motion needs to reflect that. So Tim is going to share by chat the proposed amendments. But basically, the amendment language, the title itself stays the same, but then accessibility to city communications is vital for civic engagement, community empowerment, and safety. Accessibility must be a core tenant rather than should be a core tenant of all city communications, comma, and then add, in ensuring the city's compliance with Civil Rights Title VI and ADA Title II. Then continuing as before, but not all bureaus have the same access to resources needed to ensure their communications reach, strike everyone, and then insert all community members, in particular limited English proficiency communities and people with disabilities. The rest of it proposed to make the same. I would suggest that as a friendly amendment.
I see that as a friendly amendment. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you.
And can we just to make sure we've got that all cleaned up, because I know that legal counsel will come back at me later. Can we accept that as just a friendly amendment, or do we need to take have a motion in a second in order to accept that?
If you move, Commissioner Fritz, I'll second.
The preference would be to move and second on that.
Okay, we have
Thank
a motion.
you. So then I move it as a friendly amendment.
And I second.
Okay, so we have a motion as a friendly amendment, and Commissioner Hardesty seconds it. So we now have an amendment to Amendment 3, correct?
That is correct.
And that is now on the table. Good, thank you for that. Just want to make sure I don't go to budget jail. I hear it's the most boring of all jails known to mankind and womankind and others. All right, next. I had a comment on item number 6, and this is relating to the Sobering Center. And the Sobering Center service, from my perspective, has an important medical aspect. It also has a public safety aspect. And the discussion about the best way to move this work forward should be coordinated between all of the city's public safety bureaus and the public safety work group. And they definitely provide a very good forum where all of those bureaus work together. That being said, the program update work has already begun. It's been happening out of my office, and it's on a faster timeline than this particular budget note proposes. And I want to be very clear that I will ensure that the work is coordinated with the city's public safety bureaus. And I share Commissioner Hardesty's goal of taking a very thoughtful, collective approach to this discussion. And I will ensure that the other public safety bureaus are part of the discussion about how to do this work going forward. But at this time, I do not support this particular budget note. And I just wanted to be honest about that and why. Commissioner Fritz?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just make sure that I'm switching between screens properly. Yes. So on that note, I believe that part of the discussion, and actually on number 7 as well, should the city be funding and managing the sobering services, or is that something that Montgomery County should do? And we know that the previous contractors, Central City Concern, had multiple reasons for not providing it. And also that over the years that I've been on the council, we've had multiple conversations about who does what. And I would suggest that it might be better for both. It might be better to amend number 7 to certainly reduce the ongoing discretionary resources in the Portland Police Bureau. And I appreciate Commissioner Hardesty and her team noticing that it was still in there. The money needs to be set aside, but I'm not sure right now if we're at the point of saying that it should be supporting a new sobering program in the fall bump, or perhaps that money should be transferred to the county and they would take on responsibility for that.
Commissioner Fritz, I do have a thought on that. That is actually a very good and a very important discussion. And that is part of the overall discussion about where this should live. And your logic is impeccable as always. However, there are negotiations to be had on this subject. But let's just say that is very much a live discussion.
Okay, that I will leave it at that. I did have a question about not funding the disparity study. We just in the spring bump funded the disparity study, and I'm kind of bemused as to why we would now not fund it. Could you explain that, please, Commissioner Hardesty?
I'm happy to explain that, Commissioner Fritz, but I want to, if you don't mind, let me respond to Mayor Wheeler's question around the CHEERS program first. And Commissioner Fritz, you beat me to the punch because Central City Concern provided this program for 30 years. And the way they provided it was not based on the best medical advice. It was a very, it was basically just a cell that people dried out in. And after sitting down and talking to the service providers at Central City Concern, I was very grateful that a community-based organization said, we know better now. We know that putting people in these sterile cells when they are inebriated or are overdosing on drugs is not the most appropriate way to provide assistance. And so I'm surprised, I guess, and heartened to hear that this work is happening in the mayor's office. But the budget note, I think, is important because I think we need to make that decision outside of policing and do it with medical professionals. Will police officers on the street benefit from whatever the new quote unquote sobering system will be? Of course they will, but it should not be based on police practices. It should be based on what are the best medical practices. And so this is why I moved this amendment forward, because we know that that treatment has changed radically, as have the severeness of the kind of detoxification that community members need. And so I'm always challenged by why the police have so many of these community contracts that really should be based on the best medical information that we have. So I hope that as the mayor and I continue to work through kind of looking at this specialty stuff, we also start really looking at these contracts, because some of them just don't make sense to me that they would be between the police bureau and the community. They should be between the city of Portland and the community. And so this $1.9 million contract that we have now is the reason why I wanted to make sure that we weren't using that money either to for overtime or for other purposes that had not been directed by this council. So that was why I was intentional about putting this in. But Mayor, I'm not clear about what your process is right now and when we can expect a new proposal to come forward.
Let me follow up with you. I don't have a specific timeline at my immediate disposal, but maybe I can even get one before this hearing is completed.
That would be helpful. And then, because I would ask that if we're not ready to reallocate it, that we do take the money out of the Portland Police budget anyway, and we put it into contingency until we come up with another plan.
Yeah, I support that. That's fine. We're not planning on using those resources for anything else. We see this service as critically important, and so I can make that commitment to you now. Sonia is telling me she believes the timeline is late summer to come back. So that's, if I hear otherwise, I'll make sure I correct that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you got
now,
it.
To Commissioner Fritz's question about the disparity study. This is one of those times when I can say, after 20 years of testifying in front of Portland City Council on disparate outcomes in contracting for the city of Portland, I can tell you that there have been 4 disparity studies in the 25 years that I have been advocating at the city of Portland. And we cannot point to one that actually has changed the outcomes for contractors that are women, that are people of color, that are led by BIPOC community members. The city of Portland, with few exceptions, and PBOT I will hold up as an exception, with few exceptions, we are woefully inadequate at holding purchasing accountable for actually diversifying our contracting pool. And a disparity study by itself won't fix it. I remember when we did a 13-volume disparity study, and then leadership changed and it sat on the shelf for a decade before we started spending more money doing more disparity studies. So I have no interest in funding a study that will do absolutely nothing to change the outcomes for BIPOC business owners in this community. I would much rather spend those dollars actually investing in outcomes. The disparity studies don't do anything except make people feel a little more comfortable about knowing that we are getting disparate outcomes, and we continue to get disparate outcomes. In the auditor's report, the auditor's audit on our procurement processes will reaffirm that every program we have is a colossal failure in actually achieving the outcomes that we say we want. So that is why I do not want to fund a disparity study.
All right, any further discussions on anything that we have left off at this point? All right, so.
Mayor.
Yeah.
I had another question, and maybe this is for Tom Reinhardt on the 8th Amendment about the timing of the implementation of the public safety alignment.
I'm happy to answer that for you, unless Tom just wants to jump in because he's bored because he's been here so long and hasn't been able to talk. Let me just say that I spoke with Tom Reinhardt, and that's why we moved it from a July implementation to an October, because the office needed more time to make it work. And we wanted to respect the fine work that the public safety work groups are currently doing, and trust the fact that that process will help us do it in a better fashion and a less disruptive manner. Is that accurate, Tom, or you want to add anything? Tom's giving me a thumbs up.
That is accurate. Thanks,
Okay,
Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Tom. So the budget note is for October rather than July?
That is correct.
Thank you.
But the work will start as soon as we pass this budget. It's just that process will happen as of October 1st. It could be sooner.
Okay.
Depending on how efficient Tom becomes with this process.
Thank you.
All right.
Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Daly. Was that
I've had my hand up to comment on the disparity study.
Oh, I'm sorry. I scrolled down. I apologize, Commissioner Daly. Go ahead.
So this is the item that I support and I'm very interested in further discussions on. We've gone through 2 disparity studies and haven't made progress that we should have made by this point. Our contract equity practices are still based on compliance with broken systems rather than bold solutions that bring about true change. I'm concerned that the methodology of disparity studies as defined by the Supreme Court is focused on statistical analysis of available firms. This prohibits us from considering the deep systemic disparities that have caused a diminished overall pool of contracting firms due to our history as a white utopia in Oregon. I'd like to further explore how we can incorporate performance-based contracting practices into our low bid model. This could involve an exemption to the low bid model altogether, or it could involve a change in the definition of lowest responsible bidder, which we've discussed before, because in my mind, if we put out a contract for bid and say that we want 20% utilization rate of MWDSB and they come back under it, that's not being a responsive bidder. PBOT has been a leader on NWESB contracting. I'm strongly committed to this work, but I do not believe that the disparity study is the right way to do it. And finally, I just want to give a shout out to Carrie Waters at PBOT, who's been doing the community building work to move the needle on contracting. Thanks.
Commissioner Fritz, you have your hand up.
I have it back up. Yeah. My recollection, and I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, was that Lester Spittler said that, you know, if we can't have hard standards on low bid contracts, unless we do the disparity study, because the last one was is too old. And in response to the concern that they're not done well, we've learned a lot, and we can this time we could do it, starting with the Black, Indigenous, people of color, to design the study to do it properly. So I know that Lester's on the call as well. I don't know if there's more to be said, because the alternative is that everything has to go to the construction manager, general contractor, which is how you get better outcomes in transportation. And I would say that in parks, the bond measure, we got excellent outcomes also. So given that we have to do low bid, unless we do the more expensive, the longer CMGC process, what are the trade-offs in that, in terms of workload for the procurement office and in terms of getting the contract work done?
Were you hoping Lester would answer that question?
Mayor, I'd like to respond to that myself.
Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you for that, Commissioner Fritz. Let me just say that the last time we did the 14-volume disparity study, I was working for Multnomah County Chairwoman Bev Stein. And the county came up with a proposal out of that disparity study that we would just require contractors at a certain amount to actually reach out to a minority firm, a woman-owned firm, and a emerging small business firm. And they had to contract with one of those firms. There are so many things the city of Portland can do if it wanted to, as it relates to procurement, that has absolutely nothing to do with a disparity study. It is a way to hide ineffectiveness when we say we can't make changes because we don't have a disparity study. The studies have been beautiful. They've been excellent. They've been well written, but nobody did anything with them. And so it makes no sense to me that we would invest one penny into a disparity study when we already know what it takes to actually hire women and minority firms. We have to actually know them. We have to reach out to them. We have to build relationships with them. And so when Lester comes in front of City Council and says, this primary contractors had 5 contracts, and he still doesn't know any people of color contractors. That's on us. That's not on that prime contractor. We can do so much better without a disparity study. If we had the political will to do it. I just think we are in a place where we are used to doing contracts a certain way, and we have not gotten out of our own way. So again, yes, we need to change. Yes, we will change based on the auditor's findings, but the disparity study is not a barrier to us actually doing better at contracting with minorities and women. Happy to hear what Lester has to say if he needs to.
Yes, I would like to hear from Lester, please.
Lester, you on? And then Commissioner Udaley after Lester.
Yeah, I am on. So the $200,000 that we were asking to carry over actually isn't enough to fund a disparity study. But we have that work session coming up that we've all committed to as a result of the audit. And we know that we're going to be exploring new ideas with a lot of stakeholders that include both city staff and external community-based organizations and contractor advocacy groups. And we were asking for that 200 to be carried over to have resources to be able to accompany proposals to council in that work session for new ideas. So that's what the $200,000 was for. At this point, we have some ideas, but those aren't vetted with the community. Those aren't vetted with your staff or vetted with the Bureau staff. So that's what the carryover was for. It wasn't actually, it's not enough to fund a full disparity study.
Very good. And Commissioner Udaley?
Oh, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on what I said earlier. The problem with the disparity study is the method. Oh, now I'm getting an echo. Sorry. The methodology, how the methodology works. It's a disparity. It relies on statistical analysis of available firms. And if that is the starting point, it is not going to help us meet our equity goals. It may, in fact, deliver a lower aspirational goal for utilization rates. And it's just the wrong place to start.
Very good. And Commissioner Hardesty, is your hand up or is that just residual?
Oh, it's residual, sorry.
All right. Any further questions about any of these before we go through them one at a time to vote on them? Seeing none, and I'll go through these relatively quickly. And again, if anybody needs to stop or slow down, just raise your hand or shout. So at this point, we will vote on Mayor Wheeler Amendment number 1. This is the motion to allocate $231,000 in one-time general fund resources and special appropriations as approved for carryover in the spring supplemental budget. Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 2, motion to allocate $146,000 in one-time resources in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability General Fund that were approved as carryover in the spring supplemental budget. Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment's adopted. Amendment 3, motion to allocate $83,000 in one-time resources in Portland Parks and Recreation General Fund that were approved for carryover in the spring supplemental budget. Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Budget. I'm getting ahead of myself.
No such luck.
The amendment is adopted. Amendment 4, motion to allocate $300,000 in one-time general fund resources in the city attorney's office in support of an approved carryover for the spring supplemental budget. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment's approved. 5, motion to allocate resources for the council ratified labor contract with the Portland Police Commanding Officers Association. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is approved. Number 6, motion to amend attachment D and add a budget note regarding the Portland Police Specialty Units as we described. Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll on amendment 6.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment's adopted. 7 was withdrawn. I don't think it requires a vote, does it, legal counsel?
The withdrawal does not.
No, I'm sorry. Because this is actually, you are amending what is currently in the budget. There is
Fair enough.
a budget note
So
currently.
amendment 7, which effectively withdraws the motion. It's a motion to amend attachment D to withdraw the budget note entitled Civic Life / Police Space Moves Plan. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye. Just a clarification, I'm voting aye to remove it from the budget. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 8, motion to transfer $118,911 in ongoing resources from the Portland Parks and Recreation Tree Mitigation Trust Fund to the Parks General Fund operating budget for a Botanic Specialist 2. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment's adopted. Amendment 9, motion to allocate $72,000 in general fund resources to Prosper Portland for the Portland Film Office. Any further discussion? Don't see any. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
I'm very happy that this money was found in really quick time. I know Commissioner Fish would be really pleased to have it back too. Aye.
Wheeler?
Ditto. Aye. The amendment's adopted. Commissioner Fritz 1, motion to allocate $123,985 in general fund resources to the Office of Equity and Human Rights for implementation of the resolution aligning COVID-19 response with the city's climate and equity goals. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
So this is a limited term position for an analyst 1 to assist with the reporting requirement in the resolution that we passed this morning. I very much appreciate that my colleagues acknowledge that the office is already doing more than is reasonable to ask for so few people, and that this money has been allocated. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 2, motion to allocate $29,540 in general fund resources to the Office of Equity and Human Rights for critical administrative capacity and support. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
This is ongoing funding for the Deputy Director position held by Dr. Kofi Desu, which is needed to help Dr. Smith with all of the responsibilities that she's got internally within the Bureau, as well as citywide.
Commissioner,
it also provides...
I think you're talking on the wrong issue.
No, that's right. This is Fritz number 2.
Oh, I'm very sorry. My apologies.
No worries.
I was in midstream. Where did I get to?
Yeah, no, it was me, not you.
Thank you. So it's for the deputy director position, which Dr. Dey-3 has been very patient in making sure that we get this very small amount of funding for that position, similarly for administrative position and for technical assistance from the Housing Bureau with the budget. And so these are small asks. As I mentioned earlier, we were not able to get funding for the civil rights position or other things that are needed to expand, but this is a good start, and I thank you, colleagues. Aye.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The amendment's adopted. Commissioner Udaley's amendment number 1, motion to allocate $547,000 in recreational cannabis tax fund resources to the Office of Community and Civic Life as described. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Well, I am very proud of the work that Civic Life's cannabis program has done, and especially the social equity grants. I fought to establish this program and to redirect funding because we're not doing nearly enough to fulfill the restorative justice component of the cannabis tax ballot measure. We're still working to improve the grant process, but the awardees have dedicated these funds to worthwhile efforts such as records expungement, rental assistance, and job training. I find it unacceptable that I have to fight. I've had to fight for these dollars every year when other bureaus have ongoing allocations. I understand that this $547,000 allocation will now be an ongoing allocation for Civic Life, and I want to thank the mayor for that. Without guaranteed funding or nearly enough to respond to award to a meaningful number of applicants, Civic Life has not been able to fund this work in a way that increases community capacity. Restorative justice is slow, deliberate work, and it doesn't happen in a year or 2 or even 3. Without resources to offer multi-year grants, Civic Life has had to hold grantees to expungement, job retention, housing placement outcomes that take time to do well. So recipients don't have the runway to get projects off the ground before it's time to reapply and report on outcomes. This work should not be funded at less than $1 million ongoing. That would allow us to do the more meaningful work that we're aiming to do. And while I'm grateful for this ongoing allocation, it's still the smallest investment in what I think is the most important aspect of the work that we do with these dollars. So I'm committed to continuing to work in order to find that $1 million for social equity grants and to reevaluating underperforming allocations in order to do so. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 2, motion to allocate one-time general fund resources to special appropriations for universal defense as described. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
I want to thank my colleagues for their support of this ask. Our community partners had asked for $750,000 initially. This $250 that we found will provide the bare minimum they need to continue providing these crucial services. I think you heard in a session recently that over 500 Portland residents have received assistance through this program, and that means 500 people who weren't torn from their families, who didn't lose their jobs, who were not put into dangerous detention centers, and were not sent back to countries where their lives may be in peril. It was a bright spot to hear about some of those outcomes for me at a time where we're not hearing a lot of good news. So they've done amazing work, and I'm very happy to vote aye.
It's you next, Mayor.
Fritz, it's Fritz.
No, I didn't get called.
Oh, Fritz.
Aye.
Sorry about that. Wheeler?
I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 3, motion to allocate $147,000 in ongoing general fund resources to fund the Regional Arts and Culture Center special appropriation. As described, any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
As vital as I know that the arts are to our community, I cannot vote to support this additional allocation. I am going to ask, and I know that it's devastating that I'm not, but what I know is that through the work that we're doing with Prosper Portland, we are working to be able to put money into the hands of musicians, lighting people, all the folks who are actually the individuals that make up parts of our artists and music community. And so it is unfortunate that based on the limited resources we have, I will be no on this.
Udaley?
Well, I'm clearly disappointed that my colleagues could not find their way to supporting this very small ask that would support RAC in continuing their work around capacity building with culturally specific arts organizations. It's going to really undermine their equity work, which Madison has been a champion of and has advanced in really impressive ways in their short tenure as director of RAC. That being said, I want to assure Madison and RAC and our arts community that I'm not going to stop fighting for you. We need a lot more than $147,000, and I am committed to helping you secure funding come hell or high water. I vote aye.
Fritz?
It's hard when there's so many needs in the community, and we know that the venues themselves are also needing some assistance to be able to provide the places where people can perform. And yeah, there's no good choices in this pandemic with the budget so tight, and so that means that everybody has to take their trimming, and therefore I vote no.
Wheeler?
This is a relatively small ask, and it would be coming out of the ongoing general fund contingency. I thought it was a reasonable adjustment. I vote aye. That said, the motion does not pass. Next item is Commissioner Hardesty's Amendment 1, motion to allocate resources for council ratified labor contract with the Portland Firefighters Association. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 2, motion to allocate $50,000 in ongoing general fund resources to support a council emergency security fund. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, for identifying this as a challenge. I'm very happy that my successor will be the first Latinx woman member of the council. In fact, the first Latinx member of the council. And we know that there are increasing hate crimes, bias crimes, especially in the pandemic. And so this is very necessary. And I appreciate that it's ongoing funds, because unfortunately, the roots of racism and hate run deep in this community, and they're not going away anytime soon, unfortunately. Thank you for your attention to this, Commissioner Hardesty. Aye.
Wheeler?
I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. And number 3 is a little different. This is first the roll call to amend Amendment 3. Any further discussion on the amendment to amend Amendment 3? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Aye. Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Amendment 3 is now amended to the main motion. Amendment 3 is amended. Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Well, I've been advocating for a central accommodations fund since I got to City Hall. We have an obligation to provide accommodations, whether it is language supports or access for those with disabilities. That support should be readily available and consistent across every bureau. And hopefully now it will begin to be. I want to thank Hannah Holloway and Margot Week, who raised this concern early on in the crisis with Eileen Park in the mayor's office. And I strongly support this allocation and hope we can devote more to it in the future. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Yeah, this is great. I vote aye. Amendment 3 is adopted as amended. Number 4, motion to allocate $633,244 in support of the Portland Street Response Pilot Program. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Amendment 4 is adopted. Amendment number 5, a motion to reduce one-time general fund resources approved in the fiscal year 1920 spring supplemental budget in the Office of Management and Finance Procurement Services for a procurement disparity study. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
So it's really troubling that we make a decision and, not even a month later, it's proposed that we change that decision. We had a good discussion with Lester Spittler in council session. He just clarified that the money isn't even for a disparity study. It's for doing the work to look at how can we improve, and that we have a work session scheduled. So until we've had that work session and until we have a way forward, it seems prudent to keep that money in procurement services line item. They won't be able to spend it unless they come in until after the work session anyway. So I believe that we should stick with what we did a couple of weeks ago. No.
Wheeler.
No, the amendment fails. Amendment 6, a motion to amend attachment D to add the following budget note regarding identifying a medically sound alternative to sobering services. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
This is the one that you're not supportive of, right, Mayor?
That's correct.
Yeah, I appreciate the intent, but as I've said, I've heard from the mayor that discussions are happening to address this. I do appreciate Commissioner Hardesty finding that line item, but I don't think this budget note is the right way to go about it at this time. No.
Wheeler.
No, the motion fails. Item 7, Amendment 7, motion to reduce the general fund ongoing discretionary resources in the Portland Police Bureau that are currently allocated for sobering services and realigning the resources to support the new sobering program to be requested in the fall supplemental budget process. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
So I'm going to support this because the note says to support a new sobering program to be requested in the fall budget. It doesn't say where that program would be, so it's possible that these funds could be transferred to the county if it is determined that they are the best location to fund this medical service. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the amendment's adopted. Amendment 8, which I think is our last one. For now, a motion to amend attachment D, specifically the budget note titled Public Safety Governance and Integrated Budgets. This motion will replace the current budget note, which identifies a fall timeline for implementation with an October 1st, 2020 start date as discussed. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. And now, if all the folks could bear with me, I want to make clear that the next step is to vote to approve changes to the budget as per the memo and the related adjustments and attachments B, C, and D of the memo is amended. Is that correct?
So Mayor, we actually do need a motion and a second, and there's some language that I believe was sent to you from Matt.
Oh, here it is. Okay, check this out. Quote, next we need to vote on a package of amendments. Do I hear a motion to, when are they gonna make a TV show out of this? Seriously. Okay, next we need to vote on a package of amendments. Do I hear a motion to approve the changes to the proposed budget as presented in the memo, as amended by the individual floor amendments to attachments B, C, and D of the memo?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second. Second.
Is there any further, and Commissioner Hardesty moved, Commissioner Fritz second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none.
The question we have, no, I just have a quick question. There's another vote. I can't find the script in my notes. There's another vote after this. This isn't the speech script.
No,
this isn't the speech vote, right?
This is not the speech vote yet.
No, this is the pre-speech vote.
This is only, this
Do let us
is
know
merely step 8. All right. So
do let us know when to give our speeches, please.
I absolutely will. So this, we just vote on the package of amendments. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Daly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
All right. So the package of amendments has now been approved. Now here's the speech piece. Oh, I didn't vote? After all that, I vote aye. The package of amendments is adopted. So now we are on step 9. The final step, to vote to approve the budget as amended. So there needs to be a motion, a second, and then we'll take a vote to approve the budget as amended. Can I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty, a second from Commissioner Fritz, if that's
No, I got it. That's not fair.
You weren't first. Don't even try it.
All right.
You got a louder voice.
So this is where everybody makes a speech, if they are so inclined. Any further discussion before we take the vote to approve the budget as amended? Seeing none, Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
First, I want to thank the mayor for his proposed budget that it seems like a lifetime ago, but it was really a very short period of time when the mayor's proposed budget was released. We are moving into a different era here at the city of Portland. Our post-pandemic city will look a lot different than our pre-pandemic city. I am thrilled to be working with such colleagues who have centered frontline communities and ensuring that we are being intentional about prioritizing those communities that have been hardest hit and those communities that we know will have a hard time recovering. Clearly, this budget and the budgets moving forward, at least in the next 3 to 5 years, will all be budgets that will be less, will have less financial resources than the city of Portland has become accustomed to. And it matters how we invest the limited resources that we have. It is my hope that this is a beginning of really looking at city services through a lens of, do we really need all those office buildings? Do we really need to all go back and operate the way we operated prior to the pandemic? Do we really need to invest in real technology so that the city can telecommute more effectively? As well, not just us, but also for community members who are suffering from the digital divide. I am proud that what this budget did was several things. One, it held all city employees to the same standard. We all will have to make sacrifices to get through this budget cycle and the next one and in the near future. and it made sure that we prioritize the lowest wage workers to ensure that they would suffer the least harm. I am proud of the work the city council did to come to this budget. It should have been a very aggressive, contentious budget cycle. But what I've learned in my year plus at City Hall and my long term here, what I've learned is that if you lead with the values and people understand the values that you are putting forward, you can normally find some medium ground that will address people's concern. Is this budget everything I would have hoped for? Of course not. But we are in a pandemic, we are in a state of crisis, and we are in an economic crisis. I think we've made some really wise decisions today. And I want to personally thank Mayor Wheeler. I just couldn't imagine Mayor Wheeler and I working on policing and other public safety issues as closely as we have over the last year. I know my friends and his friends probably freak out to think that we are in such alignment many times around what's the right thing to do as it relates to community safety and public safety and what it looks like and how our community experiences it. And so for me, this budget cycle, even though it was quick, even though it's painful, even though all of us are taking cuts, I am so proud of where we ended, because what I know is that where we ended is in a place where our values are really stamped into this budget, and it will be stamped into all the work that we move forward in implementing this budget. I want to thank each of my colleagues. Each office was so critical to where we are. And I think this is an opportunity to thank the mayor and my city council colleagues for the incredible leadership that's been shown through this pandemic. I mean, I knew we had strong leadership at the city of Portland. I knew we had strong directors that were visionary and that were willing to work an enormous number of hours to get the job done. But what this pandemic showed me is that at the top, at every level at the city of Portland, we have people who lead with their heart and lead with their values. And I think this budget is the first step in the process of making sure, as we start the rebuilding process, that we don't lose those values. We don't lose that sense of why we're doing this work. And we don't lose this sense of we're doing it for the people who have never had a voice in this process. I am very happy to vote aye.
You Daly.
Well, I'm pleased to have made some progress in this year's budget. We've been able to get some wins for equitable use of the cannabis fund and universal representation. I'm obviously very disappointed in our failure to partially restore the cut to RAC, which, to be clear, cuts their capacity building grants to culturally specific organizations. And as a city, we like to talk a lot about equity. And I personally believe that we should put our money where our mouth is. I am going to be looking to my colleagues for commitments in the future to address the needs of the arts community. I don't feel like the council is grasping the uniquely vulnerable position artists, arts organizations, and arts venues are in, and the fact that so little of the relief thus far is available or appropriate to them. So I want to thank the mayor for supporting that, although the motion failed. All our systemic failures are on display, and I have been really impressed how everyone has been hustling to try to address the glaring needs in our community. And I would assert that that is how we should function during normal times as well, because as we know, there is always a crisis for people in our community who are unhoused, who are being underserved, who are being discriminated against in our community. So this is a painful but necessary exercise in how to prioritize the most vulnerable and least well-served people in our community. I want to thank my office staff, especially my policy team, Marcia Runfel, Jamie Duhamel, Hannah Holloway, and Andres Oswell, who has taught me how to roll my R's. And I want to thank my directors, Sukri and Chris from PBOT. They've worked really hard and made some real sacrifices in our budgets to align with the city's priorities. I also want to thank RAC Director Madison Cario for being here today. And finally, I want to thank Jessica Kennard and her team at the budget office. Every year of the budget cycle has been uniquely challenging. We were set up for what seemed to me like the easiest one we've had in the 4 years that I've been here. And surprise, this happened. So thank you so much. Your input has been invaluable, and I really appreciate your hard work. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Well, this is my final budget, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime budget. There's nothing like it in my 12 years. Nothing is the same as it ever was. And we had high hopes when we started this budget with no cuts and the ability to fund some council priorities, and the coronavirus has changed everything. But we've asked ourselves, how did we get here? And we, this morning, reflected on the inequities in our community and brought the resiliency resolution and the way out of it, the principles, at the same time as we're affirming the budget. I do appreciate that the council approved a modest request for the Office of Equity, and I trust you to keep going on that afterwards, after I'm gone. There's so many things to say. The Columbia Pool is currently closed, but when it's safe to reopen pools, Columbia Pool will be funded for another year, which is what the mayor committed to do. And Mayor Wheeler, your leadership in this pandemic and in this budget has been absolutely outstanding. That you have really taken the reins, and at the same time been, I think, this most collaborative budget that I've been involved in under your administration. So that's really good to see that it's bringing out the best in all of us. And thank you, Commissioners Udaley and Hardesty, for working collaboratively to get to consensus to this yes vote. Particularly recognize Christian Dennis and Sonia Schmansky and the mayor's entire team. Of course, Jessica Kennard and her entire team, absolutely phenomenal under very unique circumstances. I thank the labor unions who are working with the council, recognizing the difficult decisions that have to be made, and really how everybody has been just aware that we need to put the community first. We need to put our city family and their jobs as a high priority, keeping health insurance going, all of the things that we care about. And finally, thank you to my team, every one of them who has been involved in this budget: Yesenia Carrillo, Misan Kwan, Claire Adamsick, Astrid Goy, and Tim Crail. And Tim has been my budget advisor for 12 years now, and it's actually literally true that I could not have done it without you. Aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I want to start by acknowledging Commissioner Fritz. As she said, this is her final budget. She's been through many of these. And Commissioner Fritz, I'm sorry that this is your last budget, because your input, your guidance, your mentorship on all these budgets has been very, very helpful to me over the last 4 years. This is my 4th budget. I don't believe it's my last budget, but this was definitely an interesting one. We were able to protect core services, as all of the commissioners have noted. It was an important value for us to retain frontline services and to retain the employees as much as possible who provide those services. And we did that through a commitment to shared sacrifice. And I want to acknowledge that We also did take this as an opportunity to move away from business as usual and make some real changes and to innovate and improve the way we do business. And we, of course, elevated our equity and our climate goals. And collectively, we were determined not to let those goals wither during this crisis. But in fact, we chose the opposite strategy, which was to elevate those goals. I also just want to acknowledge that much of this work happened with collaboration from our regional partners. The City of Portland's budget is never in a vacuum. It has an impact on what happens at the county. It has an impact on what happens at the metropolitan level, at the metro level. And I want to appreciate the thoughtfulness for that kind of collaborative effort. We supported the services for those who are most vulnerable, including those who are currently living on our streets. We protected the ability of small businesses to get through this crisis, and we put a special emphasis on businesses owned by people of color and women. We protected safety net services for vulnerable populations, and as Commissioner Fritz just mentioned, we were determined not to let our community parks wither, and in fact, we have funded strategies to build a bridge to a sustainable future for those parks' assets. There's obviously a lot more work to be done. We'll continue to work with our labor leadership to find ways where we can partner to find savings without additional layoffs. And of course, there's more work to be done in the fall. So we haven't closed the entire gap, but we've done the best we can with the information we have as of today. But we know that the picture will become clearer in the coming months as we get updated economic information. This fall, when we have the full impact of this crisis, clarity on the full impact of the financial crisis, will take whatever additional steps are necessary in order to balance the budget. Between now and then, of course, the bureaus have been directed to work to identify the most thoughtful approach to addressing those potential budget shortfalls. I also want to thank Jessica Kennard and the entire City Budget Office. I want to thank my colleagues on the City Council, their chiefs of staff and their teams. Almost everybody in every office had some hand in the crafting of this budget. This is something that we should all be collectively proud of. We all collaborated on it. We all worked together on it. And I really liked that the team approach that we used to put this together. In my own office, I want to particularly thank Kristen and Sonia. With that, I'm very proud to vote aye on this budget. And with that, the budget is approved as amended. And since Commissioner Fritz, this was your last budget, I'll say, and now for something completely different. We're not quite done yet. I need to make sure that we approve tax levies as required under state law. So the city shall levy its full permanent rate of $4.5770 per $1,000 of assessed value, and $28,465,679 for the payment of voter-approved general obligation bond principal and interest, and $182,346,015 for the obligations for the Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Fund, and 0.4026 cents per $1,000 of assessed value for the Children's Levy. Furthermore, the city shall levy the amounts listed in Attachment E for urban renewal collections. So I'll entertain a motion and a second to approve the tax levies.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Hardesty moves, Commissioner Fritz seconds. Is there any further discussion regarding the tax levies? Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Daly?
Aye.
Fritz?
We know that taxes pay for services, and we know that many people are going to find it very difficult to pay their taxes in the wake of this, during the pandemic and after. So I always make a point of thanking the taxpayers of Portland for their contributions to this budget, which we then tries to spend their money as wisely as possible. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The tax levies are approved. And with that, Director Kennard, can you tell us a little bit about the next steps?
Absolutely, Mayor. So we are almost there, you guys. Thank you so much for your patience, and for anybody that is watching at home, for you as well. The budget has now been approved by the council. The approved budget will be sent to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, TSCC, for review. The TSCC has 20 days to review the budget. TSCC will then conduct a hearing on the city's approved budget on Tuesday, June 9th at 9:30 in the morning. This will be a virtual meeting and conducted through the council clerk's process for hosting virtual work sessions. The final budget adoption is set for Wednesday, June 10th at 2 p.m. Public testimony can be received at next Wednesday's, at the June 9th TSCC hearing and at the June 10th budget adoption hearing.
Very good. Then unless there's any further questions or business, Commissioner Hardesty, you look like you have something.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I was woefully inadequate in my remarks, and I forgot to thank some really key people. And so if I may, I'd like to thank Kristen Johnson, who's my budget analyst in my office, Carly Edwards, my chief of staff, Doug Bradley. I want to thank Sonia from your office, and Kristen, who was just incredible to work with through this budget process. I don't normally thank people, and so I always forget to thank people when it's absolutely critical. And I certainly want to take the moment to thank Jessica Kennard and her staff. I got to tell you, I didn't know budgets were this easy, and they're only easy because of the expertise of Jessica Kennard and her staff and how easy they make it look. I know that this is not an easy budget, but I feel like an expert on this budget because of the support that my office receives from the budget office. So I just want to thanks all around. I just think that this was a very collaborative budget process. And thank you, Mayor, for giving me a chance to say thank you. I would have not been able to live with myself leaving this program and not having said thank you to all the others who helped make today's budget possible. Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Hardesty, as you know, this is the stock and trade of the flower business. So there's always a chance to make it up later. So with that, colleagues, this meeting of the City of Portland Budget Committee is now adjourned. Thank you all.
Yeah, the title of it. Yeah, it was once in a lifetime.
All right,
yeah.
Good. All right. Well, we're back in session, everybody. Carly, did we get open signal back? I see OS production.
Yeah, let me check here.
All right, I think they're on. I just want to make sure. They're probably not very happy with me.
I was trying to catch you, Mayor. I was like, but prosper. And you were gone.
Okay, I'm told they're back. So you'll remember at the end of season 1, the cliffhanger was I said, I have a feeling this won't be my last budget. So here we are, episode 1, season 2, taking up with my next budget. So I'm now convening the Prosper Portland Budget Committee for the purpose of approving the fiscal year 2021 budget. The Prosper Portland Budget Committee received the proposed budget and received testimony back on May 13th. The Budget Committee received the approved budget change memo and Exhibit A to Resolution 7372 back on May 15th. And I now request that Carla call the roll for the Prosper Portland Budget Committee.
Sorry, I was checking my Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaley.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. The Budget Committee received the revised approved budget change memo and a revised Exhibit A to Resolution 7372 on May 19th that included adjustments to housing appropriations necessary to match changes to the City of Portland approved budget. And before I ask for a motion to accept the revised change memo and Exhibit A to Resolution 7372, I have a question for our smart budget people. We adopted an amendment in the approved budget that was reference to the film office, and I'm wondering how we include that amendment in the Prosper Portland budget. And so before we go too far, can I just make sure somebody stops us at the appropriate moment and says we need to enter something into the record here?
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. Tony Barnes with Prosper Portland. Yes, there's an opportunity after the revised Exhibit A and resolution to enter in additional amendments. And so any amendments related to the city's approval would want to be entered at that point and voted on. And then it would include the film office and the change in the cannabis allocation too.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Tony. So at this point, then I'll ask for a motion to accept the revised change memo in Exhibit A to Resolution 7372.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty, a second from Commissioner Udaley, and now we have to vote on that motion, is my understanding at this point. Tony's shaking his head
That's
yes.
correct.
Any further discussion? Carla, call the roll, please.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the motion carries. I'm now calling for individual amendments to the memo from commissioners. In each case, we'll need to specifically state the amount and purpose. And I believe this is where we would have the opportunity to add the film office amendment. I propose, my motion would be to increase general fund appropriations to fund the Portland Film Office as follows. To amend the Prosper Portland General Fund budget as shown in Exhibit A, to increase economic development appropriations by $72,000. This amendment is necessary to reflect general fund resources being added for the Portland Film Office during approval of the City of Portland budget. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Hardesty. I can return that laptop.
No, I absolutely got that one.
No, you
Clear.
did. You did not. You just aren't as fast as I am.
No, seriously, I was.
Okay.
And actually,
Commissioner Hardesty, it's her last budget. It's her last
Commissioner
budget.
Fritz. It's her last budget. Give it to her.
Commissioner Fritz seconds it. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. I appreciate that. And there was one more, Tony, is that correct?
That's correct. It would be a reduction to the general fund for economic development appropriations by the $547,000 in cannabis tax resources related to the prior approval.
Okay. Can somebody move and second that?
So moved. Where are you, Commissioner Fritz?
Commissioner Fritz?
You know, I did second. You might want to watch the where it lights up on the Zoom, because I think maybe my being connected by telephone is different, is doing some kind of different delay than doing it over the internet.
It does. It does. Yeah. Okay. Good. So Commissioner Hardesty moved that. Commissioner Fritz seconded that. If that's okay with you, Commissioner Fritz.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Let's see. Is there any further discussion on these amendments before we go to public testimony? Tony, are there any other amendments that you believe we should have added that we have forgotten at this point?
No, Mayor.
Very good. Carla, is there any public testimony?
No one registered for this item, Mayor.
Very good. I am now calling to entertain a motion to vote to approve the budget adjustments in Exhibit A of the Resolution 7372 as amended. Can I get a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty, a second from Commissioner Fritz. We will now approve the budget as amended. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Well, Commissioner Hardesty, I appreciate you letting me have the second on the film office amendment. As I said, Commissioner Fish was particularly fond of it, and I also have learned over the course of time how important it is to our economy. So thank you, Mayor, for making sure that got funded. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. So the budget is approved as amended for Prosper Portland. The meeting of the Prosper Portland Budget Committee is now adjourned. Before I hang up, is there anything else we're supposed to do?
That concludes it. Our next steps are to submit the approved budget to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, who will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, June 10th at 3 p.m. with the Prosper Board of Commissioners.
All right, good. And is there any other business for the good of the order? Are we really truly done?
Let's hope so.
It looks like we're really truly done. So I'm going to hang up now unless somebody stops me and says there's more to do. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you all.
We'll see you later.
Bye.